Welcome to the String Theory of the Unexplained. I'm your host, John Ventre. Our co-host is Fred Saluga, and today's guest is Dr Medich as we discuss the truth behind alien abduction. Well, guys, this is our 76th and final episode, you know, and I really want to drink a toast. Fred's been in every episode with me.
Here's to you, Fred, John.
Thank you.
Best of health and good luck.
And you were in our very first episode, if you remember that.
I remember it, right, in Pittsburgh.
And we talked about abductions, but Fred, that was 4 years ago. Do you realize that? That was 4 years ago. We filmed, I think it's 53 episodes in Pittsburgh in the studio.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem with the studio was you couldn't add graphics and things. It was pretty much, they gave you a nice studio and you filmed, but you couldn't add anything. And we have filmed 23 here at my house. And personally, I think these are better because our camera guy, Jamie, can edit and he can add the graphics in, and I think that these, and this is, I'm just so proud that we did 76 episodes without a retake, and they're all different.
Yeah. And we did the one we went to the church. Remember we went from Pittsburgh down to the church?
Oh, yeah, that was
We did
still,
how many down there?
yeah, well, I counted that in the 53. We did about a dozen over in the abandoned church because they were remodeling the studio. But you know, how many other people, Doc, state directors, are doing stuff like this to promote the genre and goes beyond just getting a case, assigning it, and having a monthly or quarterly meeting?
I think when we have these informal discussions, it adds, it adds a depth that you don't get with just one case presentation or even an article on something.
Yeah.
You know, and as far as the location, I've watched your video on YouTube about the haunting. When you went through the house.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just amazed at the stuff in your house. So
Yeah,
this is
yeah,
a much better location.
Yeah, well,
A lot more interesting stuff than in that studio.
And I've had people say that the stuff in your house attracts this.
Yes.
Because I've had numerous different things show up here. And you see, I take a religious perspective now towards that, you know. So, but we'll talk about all of that. So, all right, well today, because you did the first episode 4 years ago, we want to talk about the truth regarding abductions as far as, because I know a lot more about it now, so do you. I mean, it's funny, I didn't really look into abductions, doing all the UFO stuff over the years for MUFON, until you said, why is it going on for 1,000 years? You got to look into this. And because of you, something showed up in my house. It was right after you said that. Do you remember?
Fred's fault.
Yeah, it was Fred's fault. I'm blaming you.
Oh, well.
Okay, let's talk, and then we're going to talk a little bit about implants, whatever you can tell us, update us on that. But the first thing I want to go over is some of the markers, and jump in if I leave anything out here, because I'm basing this on some information I had years ago from Ann Druffel from 1988.
How to stop an abduction.
Yeah, how to stop it, markers, that type of stuff. So, and probably some books I've read too, but it says that in most UFOs are seen at 10 p.m. I remember it was on Wednesdays too for some reason. 10 p.m., but most abductions take place around 3 a.m. This lost time, it targets one person, so you could be in bed, husband and wife, it'll take the wife, not the husband. Targets one person, it's mostly females. A lot of times, the first time it happens is around 13 and it comes back in the 20s, okay? Sometimes the person sees a human-sized owl, rabbit, or maybe whatever you would accept if you're younger, you know, but you're really taken by a creature. The alien is a creature, you know, this is not an angel, it's a creature.
Those are screen memories.
Yeah.
And that too,
Because
explain what that is.
The first thing that they do, because they're afraid of us physically,
Right.
because we're violent, and especially when we get frightened, first thing we try to do is defend ourselves, and usually with violence.
Okay.
So somehow they have the ability to gain neurologic control over us. We don't know how they do it, you know, but we know they do it.
Yeah.
So they pacify everybody, they'll paralyze them. I hear time and time again people will say, I had this funny feeling come over me, I was laying in bed and I couldn't move. The only thing I could move was my eyes.
Yeah.
The only thing I could move, I couldn't turn my head, I couldn't lift my arm. The only thing I could move was my eyes. So once they gain neurologic control, then they're able to pretty much do whatever they want with you.
And that happened to my daughter upstairs, so she could only see. So you're saying they don't shapeshift into a rabbit, they're making you see it telepathically. It's not physically the rabbit.
It's a screen memory. It's
Okay.
an idea that's planted in your head. I mean,
Okay.
they see a rabbit, but the rabbit's not really there.
Yeah, okay. But don't you realize, all the cases we ever did, where, remember they would say, they're in a group of 3 or 4, and one person saw the UFO?
Right.
It's the same thing. It
But-
wasn't really there. It was put in one person's brain.
Most of the abductions that we get in ERT don't have UFO sightings at all.
So it's separate
kinda
without the
rare.
craft.
You know, I haven't done a study on it, but if it's 50%, that's high.
But
So
don't you-
usually the people that get abducted don't even see a UFO.
But don't you think in the 60s and 70s they were related to a UFO and not separate? This changed, I think in the 80s, it changed from a UFO in a craft was seen to being this late night thing in your bedroom, that its MO had changed, and that was about 30 years ago, I'd say.
Well, I can tell you this, it seems like the essence of the abductions have changed over the past few years. You know, back in the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, it was the person got abducted, they got taken up to the ship, they were paralyzed, put on a table, something sexual was done to them, ova, sperm was harvested, the females were implanted, sometimes they got a tour of the ship and then were taken back. We don't hear that very much anymore.
Right.
I don't know whether this particular breed of aliens has stopped their breeding program and moved on to something else, or whether or not there are other groups of aliens now more involved with abduction or contact. You know, we try to differentiate abduction and contact. And abduction is a kidnapping,
Yeah,
basically.
right.
Absolutely.
When somebody's taken from their environment to another place against their will. A lot of times we hear from people who have engaged these extraterrestrial creatures in a very friendly, benign way.
Right.
And those are contact experiences, those aren't abductions.
Contactees.
Yeah.
So you're saying that maybe what was experienced with Travis Walton and earlier was a different species, and the one that's here is doing something differently, you know? Now, I remember, and I think it was Kathy Martin said to me about 2 years ago at the Erie conference, or one of them, she said they haven't had a well-documented abduction case since 2013. Somebody told me that. Is that true, or are you
No,
still
no.
getting
We're-
a lot of well-documented, but I mean cases that happen now, not something they remember
Yeah,
from
and
20 years ago?
I talked to a girl last week
Okay.
who's been having abduction experiences since she was 3,
Okay.
and they keep going on.
Okay.
And what's really interesting about this is it seems the more people are abducted, the less fear they have.
Mhm.
They seem to want them to continue to, the people that are abducted are getting something out of it.
Mhm.
Whether it's an increase in their spirituality, changing their outlook on life, something happens to them that makes them less afraid and want the abductions to continue. There's something going on here. They're getting something from the abduction
But
experience.
don't we know that, like the Stockholm Syndrome, that even if you have an abusive husband or father, people stay in those relationships because it's what they're familiar with. It doesn't mean it's good for them.
Well, the other thing is, they can't avoid being abducted.
Right, they have no choice
They
in
got no
it.
choice.
One of the cases I had a couple of years ago was a lady. She said her granddaughter was being abducted and she would go with her granddaughter. So she was a contactee. But again, you look at Jimmy, I'll have to say the last name.
Mhm.
I mean, if he's being abducted as he says he is, I mean, he said they come to his house every day. And when we talk about aliens being demons and that, the man goes off. He
Yeah,
says, these things-
he disagrees.
oh, he said they tell him, why do you even talk to these people? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think you got a bunch of contactees out there that, like you say, they've been there, and for some reason they go back.
You want anything else in your drink? Did you want, you want anything else? Okay.
Yeah, so, there's a whole bunch of crossover. It's really a spectrum from a very benign encounter where a person will be given something, either a psychic insight or some kind of mental power, or, we have a lot of cases of physical healing.
Yeah.
Where people have been healed of chronic medical problems, cancers cured, heart disease cured, infections cured. Boy, I'd love to have their medicine. I mean, it would make our life a lot easier. So there's a whole spectrum, including on the other end where these benign, invasive, painful procedures that are done to people.
Could that be a different breed of them? I mean,
I think what happens to you depends on who gets you.
yeah.
There's more than one species out there making contact with us and studying us. So what happens to you depends on what their objectives are. We're still trying to figure out what it is.
When I had what was clearly a demonic attack, I had some psychic short-term abilities. I saw someone coming out of a dream told me, basically my grandson was being born. I got up and there it was on the phone. 6 months later during the baptism, when we were going to the car, I knew we were going to get in an accident. 2 minutes later we were T-boned. There were things that happened, but in my case, it was something spiritual, but it was absolutely malevolent, So it's almost like when they touch you, it changes you.
I think a lot of people that have UFO experiences have paranormal
Yeah,
experiences.
they do.
I
So
mean,
who-
they got poltergeist activity going on, they got telepathy, they got all kinds of stuff.
Poltergeist activity is a very common sequela of abductions.
Right.
People will say that after an abduction experience, they'll have effects on electrical equipment. Their cell phones will die.
Yeah.
They'll blow out computers and light bulbs just by walking by them.
Right.
Doors will open and close in their house, stuff like that.
Right.
I don't know where that comes from.
But
But
you see-
it didn't happen before the abduction, now it's happening
Yeah,
after.
yeah.
But is it a leap of faith to say these are aliens from space? What if it's nothing more than what has always been here religiously of Jesus and Satan, angels and fallen angels, and all the other things we call it that we can't prove? That's not really what it is. You really got this. And the dark side is a deceiver and can make you think that it's other things, but it's really just that.
Yeah. I think it's hard to put a stamp
Well,
on it
nobody
and call
knows.
it one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
I
can't.
think there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of paranormal overlap in
Right.
alien abduction.
And it's
A lot
funny,
of
a
that.
few years ago, if you said that, people would have disagreed, but I know based on my experience, I view the whole thing now as paranormal.
I don't think there's any doubt that there's demonic activity going on. I know, reading the book, The House on Brownsville Road,
Yeah.
I mean, if you believe what Bob Cramner said in
Yeah.
that book, you have to believe that there are demons.
Yeah, well, Bill, look at it this way. This guy was county commissioner of Pittsburgh. He got all the funding for the stadiums. He runs a political consulting group that Congressman Tim Murphy just got hired by him because he's no longer a congressman. Why would he come out and say, I got demons in my house?
Yeah.
That doesn't add to your business venture,
No.
That's
because
not a
the guy,
credibility move.
yeah,
right?
he told the truth, just like I told the truth. I don't get anything out of this. Matter of fact, the UFO crowd scoffs at the fact that I said this was a demonic encounter. It was absolutely malevolent, But I'm not looking for anything. I'm just telling the truth,
Look who you are, though.
Huh? Well, because I made a name in the UFO field, though. Because
Yeah.
he's now
Yeah.
a traitor to the cause, and that's not it,
Well, you can't label everything. It's not that
No.
simple.
Mhm.
It would be nice if you could compartmentalize all these things, but there's just too much overlap.
It seems, Nick Redfern said that to me too.
Yeah.
Because, in my mind, being a security director at UPS, things had to be black or white. There really wasn't gray. You stole it, you didn't steal it.
Mm.
You forged it, you didn't forge it. And that's how I look at it. It is or it isn't.
Right.
And Nick was the one who said,
That's
it's
what it is.
multiple stuff,
Yeah.
it's not just that.
Well, but see, again, when you look at it, it's like a lot of people make fun of the thing of the demons with that. But again, if you use the name of Jesus during an abduction,
So you can stop
Why do
somebody.
they back away?
Right.
So,
some
I
of them
mean-
will stop.
You got that
Why
piece of
would-
paper?
Right here.
Look at the last line.
Andruffel's book, yeah.
Yeah, and Ruffle. What's the last line?
Andruffel was a therapist who ran across some patients of hers who were able to stop abductions.
Yeah.
She wrote a book about it,
Yep.
and it's called How to Defend Yourself Against Alien Abductions. It was written in 1988. And she has 6 different methods here to stop an abduction. And number 6 is appeal to spiritual personages.
Right.
And it's not just Jesus, it
Yeah.
could be Allah, it could be God, it could
Yeah,
be
right,
somebody.
yeah.
Direct appeal to a spiritual being, God, Buddha, Mohammed, St. Michael, somebody. In some cases, this stops what was supposedly an abduction, but was it really an abduction?
No.
Or was
Well,
it
why,
something else?
well, I'm just saying that can't be alien. Those can't be alien because you're appealing to a religious
Yeah,
figure.
the
Those
the
are
aliens,
not aliens.
yeah, the aliens don't care what kind of God you have.
They might not even have a
They-
God.
They have, they have a job to do, and that's one thing I think that differentiates abduction and demonic possession, is the aliens have a job to do. They're goal-oriented. They come in, do what they have to do, get your butt up to the ship, back down, and then leave. They don't stay around and torture you.
Mhm.
They don't make stuff come out of your walls,
But they keep coming
scratch
back.
you,
Yeah.
or make noises in your house. They
Right.
don't do that. That's a waste of time for them.
Yeah.
They don't do that. They're very businesslike.
But the demonic is there to scare you.
But the demonic is there to,
Absolutely
Keep-
scare you.
keep
And
you
the
afraid,
alien
yeah.
wants to make you think it's a giant rabbit or something to calm you down. The demonic is there to scare the crap out of you.
but once they're done with the abduction, it's over. I mean, they don't hang around and torture you.
But how many different types of aliens do we have now doing this?
Oh, man, Fred, somebody
Yeah.
said 57, who knows?
Every
Who knows?
planet
Maybe
would,
hundreds of them.
every planet would be a different
Hundreds of
species.
different
I mean,
species,
but they've been doing abductions since when?
Ever.
since the
Yeah.
Bible was written.
Yeah.
It's
I mean, so
forever.
what, I mean, to me, what are they looking for?
See,
I
that's
mean,
why I say it's the
I mean-
Nephilim. This whole thing is demonic. It's fallen angels
What are
just
we looking
disguising
What
themselves.
are they looking for?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, what are they looking for? I mean,
We've been trying to figure out objectives for so long, and I bet each individual group has their own individual objective. Some of them just want to kind of watch us and see what happens. Some of them like to mess with our genetics and see what
Yeah.
happens. Some of them
Guinea
are afraid
pigs.
we're going to, yeah, some of them are afraid we're going to blow ourselves up. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, take a look at the time the UFO came and shut down the missile silos up at Monstrom
Yeah.
Air Force Base and
I
also in South Dakota.
just printed
That was a
out.
message.
Yeah.
That was a message. You know what the message was? We're not
Stop.
gonna let you blow yourself
Yeah.
up. You will never have a nuclear war.
No,
You will never have one. We won't let you.
no.
That's what that tells me.
So maybe they're working with Trump.
Yeah.
Carry the big stick, but don't actually do it.
Maybe the Rocket Man.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, I hope they're not working with him. But, you know, when David Jacobs came here for the first time to speak in Pittsburgh, I told him about some things that happened in 1999. You know, so, and this kind of goes, so, you know, did you wake up in the wrong bed? Some abductees did. Did you wake up with your clothes on backwards? That happens because they don't know how to redress you. It's not their
You
clothing.
wake up in a different place where you went to
Yeah,
sleep.
yeah. A different room.
Yeah, the sine qua non of alien abduction is missing time.
Mhm.
If you have a chunk of your life that you can't explain where you were, you know,
Possible.
you were somewhere else, somebody else got you. And we have cases, the ERT has cases where people were absent from their environment for a specific amount of time. People went and looked for these people that
Yeah.
were gone. And they were gone, they couldn't find them, and then all of a sudden they were back.
Right back where they looked, and
right
the person's there.
And we hear that with David Polides,
Right.
his missing persons. People, search parties go out and search areas for these people that are missing, and then 2 days later, the person's right in an area that was searched. So where were they?
But also on that same token, if you're walking up around the curve, aliens can stop time. So what they do, they stop time, they take the person they're taking, they open time back up again, and there you go, and then you're missing. I mean, that's, you know,
So, you know, my personal opinion is a lot of the things that David Polides is talking about could be explained by alien abduction.
yeah, I agree.
But he's got to be careful what he says, but,
He won't commit.
you know, abduction would
Well,
explain.
we don't.
You know,
He won't commit.
we're a little more radical.
So one of the other markers that are seen, a lot of times are orb seen or there's electronic problems.
Right.
You know, and the same thing happens with demonic activity. It's interesting how there's an overlap with about 2/3 of this stuff. The one thing that and I think this is almost as important as saying if you call upon Jesus, you can repel an alien, a demon. And when I was at Pilates event, one of the speakers got up and talked about how they repelled a Bigfoot by calling upon Jesus because it was a shapeshifter. It wasn't really a primate, you know.
Right.
But what I put a lot of faith in here is that animal reactions,
Yeah.
how pets react. My dog went ballistic probably 4 times when there was something in the house. And like I said, you know, he can see them walking down the street and he'll bark. And then the UPS guy comes to the door and he goes crazy, spinning and the most angry. That's how he barked. Animals have instinct. Even though you say some of this is good, the animal reactions in my dog is if it materialized, he would have bit it because it was evil. Now maybe that's a different type, you know, which I have to give you credit on that. Because I think they're all the same. I think they just wear a different hat and a different shirt, you know, and I think it's all the same origin. But the pet reactions are never positive.
Right.
You don't see pets walking up and wanting to lick the
Don't see their tail wagging.
you don't want them to lick his missing hand and drink the blood here that's dripping from it, you know. But, you know, the pet reactions to me says a lot. There's telepathic messages. You already talked about that. Sometimes people have bruising and scoop marks taken and there's blood found on the pillow.
Right, the blood on the pillow is usually from an implant in the nose, up in the supraorbital sinus, and they'll have a nosebleed, find blood on the pillow the next day. The scoop marks we think are just biopsies, and I think what they do is use they'll take somebody's tissue and grow it in culture, and then encase the implant in it, put it back in with their people's own tissue around it so it won't get rejected.
That's some scary stuff.
That's interesting.
I think
This-
that's what they're going with.
There's always a physical examination. People find it frightening. Now, they may get used to it and accept it later, but the initial couple of attacks are considered frightening. And here's another important marker. This is the opposite of what happens during a near-death experience. There are certain steps and markers to that, but it's never frightening. It's always you meet a relative, you get a choice to come back. They don't come back again for another near-death experience, you know.
I think they're separate things.
They are, yeah, and one is positive and one's
But
negative.
you know what's interesting here? My daughter just had a near-death experience. And she said when you was talking about the animal, on a helicopter, there was a yellow cat. And in the hospital,
On a helicopter?
there was a yellow cat and it was at the hospital. And she called it Primus or whatever. And I asked one of the nurses down there, I said, have you ever heard stories like this before? And they said, yeah, I think that's a screen memory too. Somebody puts in there, whoever she died, whoever she talked
So
to.
there really wasn't a cat?
No, but they had her see it because she likes cats,
Could
you
be.
know?
Could be.
So,
Other markers are, it repeats itself, it's uninvited, you don't have a choice in it. We already talked about being able to repel it through Jesus, and that the person memory is impaired. Now, during a near-death experience, your memory is not impaired. During a demonic attack like mine, the memory is not
But
impaired.
they do another interesting thing. They'll put information into somebody's head
Right,
that they won't let them have access to for years later.
just like MK Ultra.
When all of a sudden, you know, someone will get a download of information that was
Right.
put in there years before. I'd really like to know how they do that.
Yeah,
well, they change your personality. And
Something-
then at a certain
something.
time, they say something and that personality will come back out again.
I don't know.
you would think that would take weeks of mind control, but they can do it like that.
Instantaneously.
Yeah.
Yeah, they could. I mean, you can't, you know, looking at it from their point of view, you can't blame them for being frightened of us.
Right,
I mean, if you show up if you broke into somebody's house, you'd expect a fight, wouldn't you?
especially if he was bigger.
Yeah,
And
you'd
stronger.
expect a fight.
Yeah.
So,
So they seem to want the DNA, but here's the strange thing.
how much is enough?
How much is enough?
Yeah.
And they don't have sex organs. They have very slim hips, they have no organs, unless they do it in a lab.
They may have evolved beyond that.
It
that
appears.
reproductive ability.
The reproductive is not
They
there.
can reproduce in ways that we don't know about
They use
yet.
tubes.
So.
And other people have said, though, unless you originate on this planet, or unless we were seeded elsewhere, the DNA wouldn't match up. If they come from a different solar system to here, we can't mate with chimps. How do you mate with somebody from another solar system? You almost have to originate from this planet, and even then, we can't mate with anything but humans.
They've been working with genetics a lot longer than we have.
Yeah.
You know,
So they
another
must be able
thing,
to do
I
it.
don't know if you have it on there. How many people have you heard where they come to take your soul? Have you heard that from anybody?
I'm hearing that more recently.
How are they going to take your soul? See, it's,
I don't know.
you know, and
I know of one case
Yeah.
where a girl was sick, her body was bad.
Mhm.
And they took her soul, her personality, out of one body and put it into a clone that was healthy. And the body that her soul was put in was exactly like the body she left, only it was healthy.
Yeah.
Now, how does that happen?
I don't know, but like you said, more and more you're hearing about this in the field. I
Well, you
mean,
know, it's almost like your soul is lodged in your brain and your spinal column. And there are times you have out-of-body experience it leaves, but I think something could happen where it can't get back into you. You know, even a demonic when it gets to the possession, that's a more powerful soul that represses you. You kind of that's why you don't remember everything, but it has now taken your body over and it's running things and it's malevolent.
I've read some articles on consciousness, and a couple of authors have suggested that your consciousness, your soul, whatever it is that makes you you, is connected to your physical body by something called a silver cord, a silver
yeah,
string.
I've heard that, yeah.
And as long as that silver cord, that silver
That's what
string
yeah.
remains intact, your consciousness can get back into your body.
Right,
But
right.
once that's cut,
Yeah,
your
you're
consciousness is
yeah.
gone.
But you know, you also have people that, for one reason or another, you know, not that they have multiple personalities, but they could just all of a sudden start speaking multiple languages. They know, it's almost like something else entered them, you know? And that they almost become somebody else, you know?
Yeah,
They could speak a language, that-
Uneducated people coming up with complicated
speaking Latin.
mathematical
Yeah.
expressions. It's not explainable.
Here's something else that, I don't remember if it was Jacques Vallée or Keel, but he said that the alien, if that's what it is, contours to the culture. For example, if you look at experiences in other countries, in India, the creature is red, because that's what their gods are, Shiva,
Yeah.
all of those, they're red-skinned.
Yeah.
In the United States, the gray is a US phenomenon mostly, right? In England, you know, you've always had fairies, elves. Every culture has almost like what would be accepted to that
Right,
culture.
right, right.
So it's able to contour to what you're going to believe, just like the rabbit, you know.
Well, they've been studying us a long time, so I'm not surprised that they
Yeah.
know what they know about us.
Yeah. Well, you said that, both of you said this has been going on forever.
Yeah.
How many samples do you need?
Well,
Unless
that's
you're
what I'm saying.
replacing the entire population.
So it must be an ongoing thing.
Yeah.
That they're making changes, seeing what happens to the changes, you know, it's an ongoing process.
And how many of them are running around here? That we don't know who they are.
Who knows?
And they're actually watching, they could be talking to us and we don't even know who the hell they are talking.
But again, I never took the biblical view of this until 4 years ago, when it turned malevolent on me. But isn't that exactly what happened in the Bible with the Nephilim and fallen angels mating with women, changing the DNA so they're no longer in the image of their creator, and then God had to destroy them all because they were an aberration? They're doing the same thing very covertly.
Maybe God is an alien.
He's alien to us because he lives in a different dimension, but no, I don't accept that. We were made in his creation, you know? But there are parallels here that you see with the religious perspective. And when
Sure.
and you know, it's like anything else. You know, if you believe in evolution,
Yeah.
you should read some books saying why it doesn't work. You know, if you believe in global warming, read some books that say why that's not true. When you read the other perspective, it's funny how now you say, they make 10 good points as to why this don't work. And it's like that with Republicans and Democrats. They're like two different species.
I think that's what we used to call education.
Yeah, but is the education slanted? Some of it is.
Oh,
Well,
no.
getting
Other
very-
than math and science.
It's getting very slanted now. I mean, they tell you
That's
things
all it
I've
is.
never heard of.
That's
I mean,
all it is slanted. And they try to replace freedom with a control system. So you have this free will to do what you want, and they're trying to almost control you like this hybrid thing. You know, and once they can get enough of you or implant to do whatever, they can control you. That's, to me, that's slavery. The alien abduction is a form of slavery, and how can that be good when you don't have free will? That's the part to me that says, I don't want anything to do with it, you know? And, Michael Heiser, he has a PhD, doctor. He said it's an unethical human rights issue, what's going on, because you have no choice.
Well-
And they do what they want, like I could do what I want with my dog. That dog has more rights than the abductee, actually.
Well, you know, if this was a police matter, it would be called kidnapping and
Yeah.
assault and an abduction.
Absolutely, it's a crime. It would be a crime.
But have you ever had any cases where the people actually went to a police department?
Most of the people that we deal with are smart enough to know that's not gonna do any good.
But don't you think
Yeah,
we...
But do you
But
think if they
occasionally
would go?
we'll get a police officer
Yeah.
who's been abducted.
But I mean, if they would go to the police department and they'd done something with them, I mean, you know, couldn't they, like say they took something over here, or they did this or that, couldn't the police department find that out?
And then what?
Well,
Well,
but
they
then
do.
you'd
Solve
have-
it, though.
you'd
They're
have
not
some
gonna,
type of evidence.
they're not gonna arrest the aliens.
No,
What
but
are
you
they
have
gonna
some
do?
type of evidence that this is occurring.
Yeah.
Should the UFO investigator tell them to report it to the police just to cover yourself?
Yeah.
That it's a crime.
I don't think it would do any good, John.
Yeah.
Because the police are basically helpless.
Right.
What are they gonna do? You know, they can't be everywhere at once, and even if they did show up and these guys gained neurologic control over the
Yeah.
policemen, you know, they wouldn't be able to help.
I've taken more of a sinister view of this whole thing. Jacobs also has it, but still says it's alien, but his is a very negative view. Mine is too. Let's talk a little bit about some of the more sinister sides of this, like this is an alien, it's government, and it's MyLabs. What do you think of that?
Well, the MyLabs came around back in the 60s and 70s. And allegedly it was the government that was actually abducting people and making them think that they were being abducted. I think they still do that to a point now. They take a lot of the abductees and they interview them.
Yeah, Steve Greer thinks they're all my
Yeah.
labs.
Yeah, well, I don't
And
know
I've
if they're
had
all
people who
MyLabs.
say that
but,
this is all
you know,
a trick.
yeah, I mean, and like I said, the guy was telling me back in the 90s about Born, and some of the things you was talking about, like changing clothes, he said they would change the clothes, they would put cigarettes in people's pockets that didn't smoke, just to see what they would do.
Well, we know MK Ultra was real.
That was
There's
MK Ultra.
documents.
Getting into one of my favorite here, Barney and Betty. You know,
You may not have known this,
Barack
but
Obama's mother and dad. There was a lot of people say that they weren't actually abducted, that they were part of the MyLab thing. That, you know, when he seen whatever appeared to be, looked like a little Nazi or whatever, and she seen something totally different. Where the hell you see an alien dressed like a German? I mean, you know, really.
And you know what I read in one book was that, and I know you're friends with Kathy, and I asked her this when she came to do our Pittsburgh show, was the fact that Betty and Barney Hill were Unitarians, which is a very liberal religion that doesn't believe in, let's say, Catholic teachings, that they're very liberal, that they opened themselves up to would be a demonic attack is what it would be. And she says, no, that had nothing to do with it, was her.
But if you
But I think
look-
religious beliefs does have
If
something to
you
do
look
with it.
at it, who was the psychiatrist that worked with
Mac?
her?
No, was it Shapiro? Was it?
He does a
Guy
lot.
in Boston. I
No,
can't
there was
remember his
another
name
guy
right
that did a
offhand.
lot of the abduction stuff back
John
then.
Mack?
No, I forget
Mac
the
was
guy's
the
name.
Boston guy.
But he said that she actually,
Stringfield?
afterward, who?
Leo Stringfield
No.
from Wyoming?
She actually had paranormal activities after that, like she had poltergeist in the
Yeah.
house.
Well, that's the
She-
thing that happens to
She had all
people.
that, and that's what he was working with. He's the guy that did the thing with Kecksburg and that, he talked to everybody.
Oh, you're talking about Hynek?
All up in Erie, he talked to him, he was a psychiatrist back then.
Leo Sprinkle?
No.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Okay, but, so, staying in line with the government, right? You know MK Ultra was real.
Right.
You know, it's funny, we're in this, and it's not until 15 years of being in this that I start reading about other things like Operation Orphan and the Collins Elite. I found out about the Collins Elite 4 years ago when I started questioning my experiences and said, you better read this book. And I said, holy, why aren't we told, for example, like there was that one guy in England who was a big name in the field. He writes a report saying this whole thing is demonic. That gets shoved. Nobody ever talks. So Operation Orphan is a branch of the CIA where the Collins elite is investigating UFOs and paranormal activity. But they conclude there are no UFOs, it's all paranormal. So then they move on to Operation Orphan, which is, if it's paranormal, we can make a weapon out of this. How do we harness the powers of this thing? Because that's what we do.
You don't have enough weapons.
Yeah, whoever's got the biggest, you gotta have a bigger stick, But that's what they tried to do with remote viewing and all these other things.
Right.
How do we get these things to help us? How do we make a deal with the devil like Faust? Is basically it.
How safe is safe enough?
Yeah.
Really.
But you know what the problem is though? If we didn't do it, the Russians would do it, the Chinese would do it, North Korea would do it. Just like I say with super soldiers.
Yeah.
The Germans have already said they're not changing anybody's DNA, not after the Hitler experiments and stuff. Do you think North Korea will? Do you think Iran will? So if you don't do it, then you're up against super soldiers if you don't do the same thing. It's unbelievable how the world works.
It'd be a lot easier just for everybody to get along with it.
Yeah, why can't we just get along,
Never gonna happen.
No, it's not apparently. So then that takes us into cattle mutilations, right? And there's a lot of people who say that that's the government with the black helicopters and they blame it on the ET, just like they show us some of their advanced craft and then have somebody put a report out that they saw a UFO. It's all a complete disinformation campaign.
I think it's both of them. I think I'd like to know why they're taking them. But again, I think the government takes them. The government, if you go where they had nuclear experiments and all of that, I think the government will take the cattle from there.
Mm-hmm.
But other places, I think that they're taking them. Again, I mean, it's just like being abducted. They're taking special parts out of the body. And if you get a human, like Todd C's supposed to have been, they take certain parts of the body. With humans, they take certain parts of the bodies with the animal. I mean, I don't know what they do with them, but
we did an episode on cults and secret societies a couple of months ago. And you hear about Illuminati, you hear about all this stuff. When you dig into it and look at it, I am totally convinced that there are certain people making these Faustian agreements with the devil. Yeah. Give me money, give me power, and you take my soul later, but I get everything now. And it's all in that presentation. Yeah. And you see it with Madonna, you see it with a lot of Miley Cyrus, you see it with all of them. They will do anything as perverted as possible for money and attention. So that, it seems like that's all part of this Operation Orphan, College Elite. We know we're dealing with something very sinister here.
I want to get back to the cattle mutilation.
Okay.
I'm going to make a point. I don't think cattle mutilations are government, because it would be a lot simpler and a lot cheaper for the government just to go buy a cow. And to go through all this rigmarole of taking this poor cow somewhere and doing all this stuff to it, it'd be cheaper.
It's a cover-up. So we want to buy
your cow. But they want you to believe it.
We want to buy your cow because we tested something here 50 years ago and we want to see what happened.
Well, they could buy the cow, they don't have to tell them what they found.
Right. So, well, they do actually have legal agreements with some ranchers to check radiation.
And Linda Moulton Howe has a case report on a lady named Judy Doherty back in the mid-'80s, who actually saw one of these cows get lifted up to the ship, watched it get dissected, and watched it brought back. So we have an eyewitness.
But I'm saying it could be both. I'm not saying it's one or the other. I mean,
Yeah. Well, I'm the one and not the other of how I have to explain this in my brain. But think about this now. It's almost like somebody. I think we talked about this. Time travel, different. With the Philadelphia experience. Yeah. And I said, well, if they can do that, and there's a show Timeless that's on, I said, why don't they do an episode where somebody goes back to replace the Dead Sea Scrolls with the version that they want? So now think about this relating to this.
Yeah.
What if this alien hybrid infiltration thing is correct, and now they do something with the CDC or the FDA? What would that do to people? That's as good as poisoning them.
One of the problems with time travel is if you go back in the past to a place, There's no time machine to get you back to where you
Yeah.
are.
I think it would, if anything, it would
The we're-
split, it
we're
would just
aware of.
split.
That we're aware of.
That we're aware of, right.
But if you can control now the CDC and the FDA, it's like, if you look at our culture today, everything you grew up believing, good is bad, bad is good. They're telling you the opposites of what you've learned for your whole life.
Yeah.
Now they're telling you, no, that's not true. And that's almost in hand with this. Alien abduction's good for you. That's what they're telling you.
Nothing's good for you. Everything causes cancer.
That's, well,
That's about it.
all right, let's add some, this is gonna be hard for me to say, but some credibility to the abduction being alien. Because I think that if you look at the older cases like the 70s, you had the Pascagoula case up the
Right.
Mississippi across Pennsylvania. That was clearly alien to me, you know?
Yeah.
And you had Travis Bolton. I've had him here in my house, we've talked, I've interviewed him. He doesn't see anything paranormal to his experience, it was physical.
They took him because he was injured, and they fixed him.
And they fixed him, I
Yeah.
agree, I agree with that.
Yeah, they hurt him and then took him, fixed him, and brought him back.
Yeah. But his is never been out of body, never been altered state. His has always been physically taken there. But there are things that he don't tell us. And if you probe and ask him, he says, I'm not going to talk about that. Because if you ask him, have they ever come back? Has there been psychological? Has there been anything telepathic? He doesn't want to talk about that stuff. Maybe it's just too difficult to talk about, you know? But, okay, so now, since I am the prosecutor, let's talk about some cases here that I put in my new book, The String Theory of the Unexplained, and I take a paranormal view of, I shouldn't even say paranormal, it's a supernatural view from a religious standpoint. I take a supernatural view of certain cases. Let's look at it as though it was demon and not alien. So the first one I want to take a look at, and this is interesting because, you know, we've all heard about these people. Some of us have read the books and accepted what it was, although it seemed very strange. But when you read books on demonology and exorcism, you find the same things happening. And then you go look at this case and say, wait a minute, that marker, that one, that one. That's the same thing. So let me tell you, and now clear your brain of the abduction. Let me describe what this person says, and you tell me, does this sound like aliens or fallen angels?
One thing before you say that.
Yeah.
If you look at an abduction and you look at a satanic ritual, they're almost the same.
I know.
Only a couple things minor.
Yeah, but nobody has neurologic control over you, the satanic ritual.
Well,
Unless the demon shows up.
yeah.
And then he's able to do stuff. The human can't do that.
But
to
even
you.
that,
Yeah.
have you ever heard of a demon paralyzing anybody?
Well, I think that same thing happened. We're shadow people. My daughter couldn't move. She could only move her eyes until that shadow person pulled out of her body. I mean, so they do. Whether that was a demon or just another classification of shadow people. But I think that's what that was, you know.
We have no idea.
And you know what's funny?
Babes in the forest.
When that happened to my daughter, I said to her, Doc, I live next to a cemetery. Maybe at night when you sleep, ghosts come and go in your body and they can feel again, right? And she goes, no, Dad, this thing was there to hurt me. That was her words. She knew it was malevolent. This was not Casper that showed up and just wanted to feel alive again. So this person here in 1967, right? She describes this, and this is a devout Christian, Catholic, I believe, right? She says what she experienced was shown was the burning death and rebirth of a phoenix. She was told she would meet the Son of the One, who she thought was Jesus, okay, because she was Catholic. She said she went to this other out-of-body place, and she saw headless creatures that would grow red eyes that would be put into the grays. Now, grays, I don't remember ever having red eyes other than Mothman, you know? But those eyes would be grown to replace them because their eyes wore out. That's probably why they're so big. They're not used to so much light. They're used to being in darkness, you know? She was taught hieroglyphic writing and tones, but she wasn't told what they mean. And she was told to repeat certain things, even though she had no idea. The language made no sense to her. And all of that, all right? She then was able to speak in tongues. She would hear two voices at once, and she could speak in two voices at the same time, right? She was told by these creatures that her two sons would die, and they both died in a car accident, okay? And today, this highly religious person is involved in all things paranormal, called Paranormal Girls, okay? So as a devout Christian, she crossed over to the paranormal. What does that all sound like to you? She said it was an alien abduction. But I'm saying what she experienced was a demonic encounter, because those markers come up time and time again with her. It was totally malevolent, you know, and that was Betty Andreasson, 1967.
Yeah, who knows what the objectives are once
Yeah.
they get a hold of you. But I do know at the beginning of the abduction, she relates that these creatures came into her kitchen through the closed door,
Yeah.
that she actually saw them, and they turned everybody off except her, and I think her daughter.
Yeah, her daughter got all into this
Her
too.
daughter.
And
Yeah,
her
and
daughter,
her daughter, and then they took Betty and all this stuff happened to her.
her daughter, within the last 6 months, year, let's say, passed away.
Oh, really?
And she was probably 50, 40s. The daughter passed away, you know. So here's another case, and I'll give you my notes. I don't need these anymore. You can have them on Billy Meier, right? You know that we were given a whole bunch of UFO books, right, from a woman in Butler. I've read most of them, and I throw them in the raffle basket for the group to sell. This is one I threw in the raffle basket called Light Years, okay? I wasn't even going to read it, but I kind of ran out of reading material, and I was going on a trip. So I said, let me take this one with me. I can take it on vacation, and I can read it, you know? Let me tell you what it says now, okay? So, I'm going to tell you whether you want to hear it or not. This is about the Billy Meier story. And you really got to read the book to get a lot more than what I'm going to tell you in 2 minutes here. But 1975, you got this Billy Meier guy who's a one-armed guy from Switzerland. He meets a alien in a ship, and it's a beautiful blonde woman called Sem Jace.
Yeah.
And she says she's a Pleiadian, which that Pleiadian comes up in other cases too, right? But her message to Billy is about, where she comes from, it's a very atheistic, materialistic world, and their God is very cold and impersonal. Matter of fact, you can give me this book back. I want you to read it, okay?
Okay.
You take it with you. Interesting book, right? So now you look up the name Sem Jace. If you Google the name Sem Jace, it shows up as a fallen angel. It's considered a second most powerful fallen angel, a cherubim, okay? And through exorcism, they're able to name a number of these demonic entities. So she's using the name of a fallen angel, right? Her biggest concern in talking to him is that the detrimental effects our religions have had on people. The religions of the world are tricking people and have a detrimental effect, right? So now this guy, he's able to, almost on demand, produce craft, take pictures. Nobody can disprove any of his pictures. They've studied, Kodak looked at him and said, these are not faked. These are real pictures. Everything this guy produced, not one thing was ever disproven scientifically, you know, video-wise or anything, that this is not real, that this is faked. So the guy has some credibility that something is going on. So now, it's 1977, 2 years later after the encounter, and he has these encounters all the time. Matter of fact, when you read the book, it went through a progression. He had one encounter, then another encounter, then Sem Jace brought him up to the more powerful one, almost like meeting the one with Betty Andreasson, you know? So now, it's a New Year's Eve party. He's at the party. There are all these people. They know about his abilities. It's been written up. People have flown there to try to discredit him. They can't. He's at the New Year's Eve party, right? And he says he's going to demonstrate some of the abilities he now has. People gain some abilities, right? He takes a coin. Give me a coin. You don't have to, but he puts it in his hand, right? His body starts to shake. The table and chair starts to shake. His face becomes all contorted, turns pale white. His eyes kind of grow in size and turn black in front of everybody. The pupils turn black in his eyes. He opens his hand. The coin is completely burnt. It's black now, completely burned. They took the coin, analyzed it, and said in order to turn this coin charred, it had to be put under 1,500 degrees temperature. He was able to do that in front of a crowd of people at a New Year's Eve party, right? He then takes another coin, he takes his nail, and he actually pushes his nail into the quarter, whatever it was, and he can make an indentation in with just his nail, like his nails were made of steel, right?
Kind of like spoon bending.
Yeah, well, that's similar to Uri Geller and those guys.
Yeah.
He then takes a nail, puts it on the table, puts his hand out at the end of the table. The nail lifts up and bounces across the table and lands into his hand. I don't know how you do these things, but this is what he did, and there was a whole room full of witnesses, right? You got to see your face right now. What? I'm telling you, read
That's why I
it.
got my hand over by you.
Read it.
Explain that one.
Read it. It's unbelievable, right? Then he takes a spoon, like some of these others, but he puts it in his hand and melts it. He melts the spoon into a bowl of whatever it was, nickel, copper, whatever it had
I
been.
never heard that stuff before.
He takes a compass and looks at it, and the needle starts just spinning around, never touched it. Okay? He claims that he had traveled back in time with Sem Jace, he met Jesus, and he actually saw the eye of God. Right? So now, like so many of these other people, he starts talking about tachyon propulsion.
Tachyon is a particle that moves faster than the speed of light.
He knows about this in
They
1970.
go backwards in time.
Yeah.
He's telling them in 1977 about this, and it hasn't been discovered yet. How does that happen? Like Bob Lazar and then unobtainium, whatever, element 115,
yeah.
whatever it was, and some of these others, they have forbidden knowledge somehow. So again, if you went to a New Year's Eve party and some guy could make the pool table shake, and you look at him and his eyes turn black, and he's all, I think I'd run.
No, I'd have another drink.
Yeah, I'd have two more. But I would not be saying, oh yeah, aliens from space. I'm saying this is the son of the devil.
But
That's
something
what I'd be
interesting
saying.
you said there, another thing. His eyes turn black. Okay, today you have the black-eyed children.
Yeah, just like that.
Is this palladium? I mean, could they be whatever? I mean,
I don't know.
you know?
If you don't got this in the frame, you got it now. That's what happened to him. His
You know,
eyes
Again,
widened.
you got the black-eyed children that everybody's afraid of. I mean, they want to come into your house. I mean, who are they?
I'm telling you, this is the more sinister view that I'm showing you here.
Let me ask you a question. You were talking about the religious aspect
Yeah.
of all of this. Why do we have so many different religions?
It's almost like, why do we have so many different colored people on different continents?
Why do
It's
we-
everybody has their own. Think about it. Why would everybody look different? Why do you go from Russia to China and they look different?
But I think at the time,
Some of that you can explain
Back in the
with
day.
climate.
Some of
with
it.
Some of
Some
that,
of it, though.
genetics. But why do we have so many different religions?
because I think back then, whenever they started, the beginning of time, nobody knew what we had here, what they had there. Their society had this stuff.
Seems to me like it's caused a lot of problems.
It does
Think
cause
about
a
this
lot of
though,
problems.
Doc.
It's the same thing.
Buddhism and Hinduism, right? So Asia, basically, India, there's no God. Buddhism and Hinduism does not have a God, okay? Only, not Catholic, but Christian and Jewish have that one God.
And
In the-
Islam has Allah.
And Islam, yeah. But the Old Testament is Judaism, right? The Old Testament. The New Testament is your Christian version. And the Muslims say that Muhammad saw Gabriel in 800 BC, AD, whatever it was. But since that was the last one, they say Jesus was real, but a prophet. But the last prophet to show up was Muhammad. So he overrides Jesus and Moses. And that's
Well,
the origin of some of this.
Answer me this. What about the Mormons?
Well, that's a similar story. They meet this
John
guy, Smith meets a Maroney,
Right.
and he gives him a buried book and has a whole nother
Yeah, the
version.
Golden Tablet. Yeah.
There's a lot of things
Where's
that don't
that
make
come from?
sense. Yeah.
I mean, we have all these different religions, people believing different things,
And it's almost different.
causing a lot of trouble.
And it's almost different continents. Like I said, you have Asians, you have Africans, you have Caucasians, you have Hispanics.
And
Why? Some of them are along the same equator line. Yet you go from Hispania to Africa to Southeast Asia and they all look different. So how is that the environment? It makes no sense.
And one thing about Mormonism, which is really interesting, Bigfoot. Allegedly Bigfoot was Cain that killed Abel, and that's who it is. He's in the Mormon religion. And that they made him, God made him that way so that people would be afraid of him forever and he could not be killed till the end of time. And that's in their religion. I've actually spoke to some Mormons. When I'm giving a presentation and I say that,
Cain became Bigfoot.
yeah, or a Bigfoot type creature.
Right.
Because I say, well, when you get into the Bigfoot thing, they say that Cain is actually Bigfoot in the Mormon religion. And a lot of Mormons look at me and they say, yeah, that's...
And Abel was the first human to ever die.
Yeah.
He was the first human to die.
And they made him into Bigfoot so that, people would be afraid of him for eternity and they couldn't kill him. So,
Okay, good. Sticking with Sam Jace now. You probably heard of Brad Steiger. He just passed away like 2 weeks ago. He wrote 175 books, okay? He becomes very anti-Christian after having an encounter with a Pleiadian named Sam Jace in 1989. So 14 years after Billy Myers, Brad Steiger has the same encounter. He concludes that these people are not from space, they're indigenous to planet Earth, but the whole religious thing with God, Jesus is all bunk. And he becomes atheistic in his beliefs. But the same person he encountered. Carla Turner, right? Now again, I shouldn't have said the name. Let me describe what happens. Now she's a doctor and a scientist. She's not religious.
She's a PhD.
PhD.
Yeah.
And was she a psychologist?
I think she had a PhD in English.
Okay, but she taught in the college and all of that.
Right. She was a professor.
Professor. Okay, so now she and her family, her husband and her son, they have shared dreams. Can you imagine getting up, going to breakfast, and all three of you had the same dream? Had shared dreams. She meets a gray and a reptilian. She's abducted. She's told that they're going to meet the old one, same as Betty Andreasson. But she meets both grays and reptilians, right? At 3 in the morning, her bed starts shaking, the shutters start rattling, toys move across the floor. We've seen this in the movie Poltergeist, right? They probably got it from this case. The radio and television turn on, turn off by themselves. She sees a crawling black mass with these finger-like tendrils sticking out of it, moving across. Now, my sister in my house in New Jersey saw that move across the ceiling. My girlfriend and myself in New Jersey saw that move across the ceiling. It was a black shadow. It didn't have the tendrils, right? It was a black shadow move across the ceiling. Her son is with his girlfriend, and they're in like a parking lot or something. There's a street light. He keeps trying to coax her to move into the darkness. He says, there's somebody I want you to meet, but it has to be out of the light. You have to go over there in the pitch black. And the girl's just absolutely frightened and won't go with him. He's trying to pull her into a darkened area, right? Her and her family, they experience personality changes, they hear voices, they have triangular wounds, like scoop marks, but it's triangular shaped. But they're warned of 2 types of grays, a good gray and a malevolent gray. Now, because she was a scientist, she never called upon God. Because I can tell you, I'm not a demonologist, but I've read enough of it. If you meet anything that's non-human and non-animal, you call anything intelligent, you call upon Jesus to protect you, and it works. It's been proven. Exorcism, demonic attacks, and now I find out with Bigfoot, it works. Because she was an atheist and a scientist, it didn't occur to her to do that. And even Betty Andreasson, she didn't do it either. And she was supposed to be very Christian, okay? So that's the description of this woman. And I say, this is a demonic encounter. She was not dealing with aliens. Everything about this was malevolent and falls in line with other demonic type cases. Whitley Strieber, he's coming to speak at our Philly conference, and hopefully he shows up. But he said he is. He said he is, right? So Whitley Strieber, right? You remember the book Communion, And he's written, I don't know how many books. He even wrote that 2012 book. He was part of that, whether you know that or not, the movie, right? Initially, he thought he was in contact with ETs. And he wrote a book, and I think I threw it in the raffle basket, I don't know if I still have it, where he later says they're after our soul, like you said, right? He wrote a book about that where they're here to steal souls. In a 1990 interview on a radio show, he admits that he was a practicing witch and a follower of the occult. And he says, I made choices a long time ago that brought me this experience. Is he dealing with aliens or is he dealing with something occult? I think he's dealing with something occult. And I think he brought it on himself, like he says. And this is the part of this that now that I have a religious perspective, I look at, and I've read the other version where they talked about this, and now I'm saying, maybe this isn't what we thought it was, you know?
But Whitley Strieber saw Greys too.
Yeah,
I mean, there's a
yeah.
picture of one on the book.
But are the Greys alien?
Yeah.
Are the Greys, you know, Aleister Crowley conjured up a Grey. The first time it's ever
Lamb.
been drawn, lamb, right?
It's a lamb?
Yeah, L-A-M, it's lamb. And he conjured it up and it was a Grey with small eyes, you know? So who are the Greys? Are they interdimensional or are they from space? So then, I don't know if you read any of John Keel's books. Have you read those?
Read some.
He's pretty good, you know, and I consider him more of a crypto guy with Mothman and all of that. But his quote from Operation Trojan Horse,
I
because
never read that book.
they're infiltrating us and tricking us. Page 299, he says the UFO manifestations seem to be, by and large, merely minor variations of the age-old demonological phenomenon. It's just demons in different clothing.
Well, so says Dog Blay says that too, doesn't he?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and we've talked about valet and other presentations and all of that. So before we move on to, oh no, excuse me, I thought we were doing, I got to the slide on implants, but I didn't. I want to talk about the free organization right now, okay? Now, I know that they have 12 PhDs and they're academics, so we're supposed to believe academics and not Joe the taxi cab driver, because their opinion has to be more believable. But I say, like, you know, how many people does it take to screw a light bulb? How many PhDs does it take to trick you? Because I think this organization is disinformation. And it's based on Ray Hernandez's encounter with a beam of energy that implanted thoughts in his head that the alien abduction is good. He had a good experience. Maybe it was an angelic experience. I don't know what he had.
Something happened.
Something happened, I agree. So, and just to be clear, in all of the alien abduction, all of these cases we discussed, something happened. It wasn't in their head. Something actually happened. That much.
Their dog was cured too.
Yeah, that much I give them. That
What?
something happened.
The dog was I think it had cancer. And after this event that happened to Ray and his wife, the dog was well.
Well,
Yeah, and you know what's funny? When I was having this stuff happen, my dog, all of a sudden, because my dog was the one protecting me, he was laying in there. He couldn't get up. He was in terrible pain. I think he couldn't move his head. I had to take him and actually carry him to the vet, put him in my car. He's 110 pounds. He got diagnosed with Lyme's disease, okay? But it's interesting that that happened right when this was happening, you know? And of course, then he had the shots and he no longer had Lyme's disease. But it happened at the exact same time that there was a demonic entity in the house, almost like it tried to injure the dog, you know? And maybe that's all coincidence, I don't know. But, so the free group, right? And I consider them propaganda, that's my opinion. And I'll say it, and I've said it all along.
I agree with you on that.
And I fought with Ray Hernandez, you know, but
And he took me off and
yeah, no, I don't get his emails anymore. But basically what he said from a survey, and surveys, it depends who you survey, it depends how the questions are worded.
Yeah.
He's come to the conclusion that 85% of abductions are a positive experience because it changes you for the better. On the cases that you're able to repel and it don't kill you.
These are what the people that are surveyed said.
But again, what's the survey? What's the?
I'm not exactly sure how they got it
who
out.
surveyed?
It was like 3,600 people on Facebook that were on
thousands
like
of people they surveyed.
paranormal sites.
And it wasn't just United States, they did different countries, England, Canada, Mexico, some South American countries, I think Germany, maybe France.
I spoke to Michael Heiser, PhD theologian, and I told him what the free group says. His response to me was, if it's so good, tell Ray Hernandez to offer his children up for alien abduction and his grandchildren.
Well, they'll come get them whether he offers them.
Well, because it's generational, right? Yeah.
They'll
So,
come.
so, and then I added to what he said, and I said, that's got to be, based on free, the alien abduction has to be a better experience than going to public school. You might as well offer all our kids up for alien abduction. What we always believed to be bad is now good. And the other thing I throw in with that is the reaction of animals who instinctively react negative to anything that's non-human or animal. You heard the dog bark.
Yeah.
He heard me. I say this is part of it. I say he's part of a disinformation campaign, whether he knows he's being used or not. And the shame is,
But the thing is, John, where's the disinformation coming from? Who's behind the whole thing?
I say it's fallen angels and Lucifer, because what he wants people to believe now is that the alien abduction is a good thing and cooperate, go along with it.
Once again, it depends on who gets you.
Right.
You know, not all of them are benign encounters. You know, some people are injured during these things, painful, but all of them are frightened. All of them get frightened. I mean,
That thing scares me so much, and I know you're in that field, and my guess is 80% of the UFO people, the MUFON people, are going to read his information, his book, his lectures, everything, and say, oh, okay, I believe that.
They do.
Yeah, and that's going to become the new norm. Alien abduction is good for you because 12 PhD people tell you it's good
I
for
was
you.
abducted when I was 4. I mean, you know.
look what happened to you.
Yeah. Look how bad it turned out.
Allegedly. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you know, I had 2 people tell me that.
Yeah.
So
I just, you know,
You need regressed.
I tell you what, dog. I think that I actually have had a few things in between here, and I think one of them.
Ever missing time?
I was being told here about a month ago that I have missing time. We was sitting in the truck, me and another guy down in Salt Fork, and a cloud in the sky got real bright, and it like light, and you could actually read a newspaper, and then it got dark. Got light and it got dark. And then I remember sitting in the truck, and he said, no, you wasn't sitting in the truck, you was outside. And I said, bullshit, I wasn't outside. He said, yes, you was, Fred. We were both standing outside. And I said, well, how much time passed? He said, I don't know. He said, but I think something was wrong with the whole situation. So I don't know if I was abducted
Your
again or not.
time slip or something.
So here's a quote. You mentioned Jacques Vallée, right? So in his book, Messengers of Deception, because I think this is a deception, right? He says, those who come in close contact with UFOs seem to bear the mark forever. Same thing with demonic activity. I will never be the same as what I was 4 years ago.
We know that.
I know that. It has absolutely changed my view, and it even changes who you are, you know, because now you're aware of something else that's not human, right? Some go mad, I can see that, right? Some slide into silent contemplation. How many people do you know, don't name them, in this field, in Pennsylvania, who are heavily involved in this, and all they do is sit and think, right? It's always like they're in constant, deep meditation, trying to figure this out. I've seen it, and I can name names, but I'm not going to.
I can name.
You know, it seemed to have hurt them, right? While others reach a physical and mental state which clearly sets them apart from other humans. They pick up abilities, either physical abilities, like Billy Myers can make this cup jump, you know, or telepathic type stuff, right? So he then goes on to say, they are the denizens, which means inhabitants. They are the inhabitants of another reality. And Jacques Vallée, I'm trying to get him to speak at either Pittsburgh or Philly, whichever one he'll do. He told me a few months ago it's too far in advance to pick, so I'm going to email him again in a couple of weeks and see if I'll offer him both, come to one. He dances around this question, and he's one of the most respected people. If you read everything he says, He says everything that they're interdimensional, not from space, can't be from space, can't hybridize with us. But he will not say that they are angels and fallen angels, but everything he describes says that. And I want to ask him that. Just like I want to ask Whitley Strieber about, tell me about being a practicing witch. So,
I'm
all right.
sure he'll get right up there and talk about it.
All right. Well, that's that part. Now, real quick, you wrote this paper on implants,
I was one of the,
procedures.
yeah, I was one of the people who developed this removal, it's called the removal and analysis of anomalous foreign objects found in the human body.
Yeah.
It's implants.
We-
It's foreign objects under the skin.
We had a couple of years ago, Roger Lear emailed me and said he wanted to speak at either of our conferences, the 3 that we were doing. And I had him scheduled, and it had to be 6 weeks later, he died. You know, so who's doing this
They'll
now?
do anything to get out of space.
That's it, to get out of dealing with me.
Well, one of the problems we have with the ERT is people that think they have implants want them taken out. I can understand why they would want to do that, but they're going to have to find their own surgeon to remove them
Yeah.
because
Right.
MUFON doesn't have a staff surgeon. I'm retired. I don't have any insurance. I can't. I could do the procedures, but I don't have any insurance to do them. So. People right off the bat are faced with finding somebody who will remove these things for them. Then, once that's done, the specimen always has to go to the place, pathology lab, for legal reasons. The pathologist has to examine it and give an opinion. And then what happens to it? Well, a lot of times these things disappear and end up in the garbage can. So we're right up against that right off the bat.
Speaking of that, the guy that was telling me about the MyLabs back in, he said that when he went to the dentist's office one day, he was having bad tooth problems, he couldn't have sex, he couldn't this and that. The dentist pulled the tooth, and when he pulled the tooth, he said, son of a bitch, and then he shut his mouth, he took something out, and he said, when he took it out, it just crumbled.
Yeah.
So,
There have been reports of implants put in teeth and things, especially in the armed forces, when people want to track people.
So there's nobody now that you could say Roger Lear was replaced by
No.
Michael Lear?
No, we have
nobody.
nobody like Roger Lear
Nobody.
now that does it. I know Daryl Sims has some people he uses
Yeah.
in Houston,
Yeah.
but if you have an implant and you want it removed, you're going to have to find your own doctor.
Okay.
But then, the other thing, this protocol that I helped write, you know, there are steps that has to be taken to verify chain of command, how it's preserved. We recommended that the area be checked with a tri-field meter for, you know, for electromagnetic radiation and stuff. But my experience has been that the vast majority of people who think they have alien implants just have retained foreign bodies. They picked them up somewhere in their life and they got a chunk of metal under their leg or something. They have a splinter or something. Last week I got an email from a guy near Cleveland who took this little red spot off of his shoulder with an X-Acto knife by himself and saved it. And he wants me to send it to Phyllis Budinger for an analysis. This is a benign hemangioma of the skin. You've seen them, little red spots on the skin.
Yeah.
This guy cut it out. He swears up and down this is an alien implant.
Like that one?
Yeah, and he's got 2 more of them.
well, the thing,
So that's been my experience with implants, is most of them aren't.
Yeah, I
the thing
agree.
I showed you, remember the lady with the thing up her nose?
Yeah.
She still swears to God that it was an implant. I says, well, no. I said, I had it looked at and it isn't. It's,
Well, it brings up another question. How do you define an implant?
right.
You know, how do you define it? If it doesn't have extraterrestrial isotopic ratios in the metal,
Yeah.
then you have to assume it was, you know, it came from here. So I mean, that's even a question that's not resolved. Is you know, how would you define an alien implant? What is it?
Before we sum up this episode, and this is our final episode, and I'm gonna ask you to give me your final views on this whole topic. I wanna talk about something that happened earlier in the year in February, and you don't have to comment on this because of your position, but a couple of people called me, and it wasn't you, other people called me and said, well, first I read that Craig Lang, who was on the abduction research team, got the flu and passed away at the UFO Congress in Arizona, right? Then people called me because I'm still very connected, right? And they said that 3 MUFON state directors experienced shadow figures in their home after attending the UFO Congress back in February of 2018, that they saw shadow people and they reported it, okay? Or talked to other people about it. One person said that at an event, and I don't think it was at the UFO Congress, but at another conference, that they had seen shadow people just walking, but everybody else didn't see it. They saw shadow people walking through the crowd and the aisles. And actually there's 2 people who said that. And it makes me wonder, because the first UFO conference I ever went to was in 1999, and I came home and had an out-of-body experience and all kinds of lucid dreams, and there was something in my bedroom, and it was malevolent. So it's odd that the things that are considered to be demonic would show up, shadow people at a UFO conference, you know? And if you can't talk, then don't comment. If you can, tell us what you think. But this, people called me and told me this.
Well, you know, shadow people, they've been around for some time too. You know, a lot of people think they're alien, a lot of people think they're demonic. I mean, again, what are they? I mean, we have no idea. I mean, and I think a lot of people can see things that other people can't. We could have a shadow person standing here right now. And you know, I can't see him and you can't see him and Doc can't see him. But he could be here right now. I mean, I think that these people can actually see things that we can't.
That could be the individual. So to sum it up, and I'll ask you your opinions, I got into this in 1996 to write a science fiction book. I've written 8 books, I think 4 are sci-fi novels, 4 are as factual can be, okay? And I get it now, like the Kecksburg case, that when I really dug into it with an engineer who came to me, I think we've been able to prove that Kecksburg was a spy satellite and was not aliens from space. And I've had so many other people, and you do have to read the skeptics' view of certain things, who claim that a lot of these cases, they fall apart when you analyze them. They can't prove what was there. But I 100% say people are experiencing something. This is not psychological. Something is really happening to them. But I also watch occasionally, and not anymore, Ancient Aliens, and you listen to Giorgio and David Wilcock and all these others, and I think these guys are one of the greatest storytellers ever. Yeah. I don't think there's 5% truth in the things that they say. I really don't believe that. I now look at so much of this as though if I went in the backyard and lit a fire, these would be great campfire stories. We can go do a Bigfoot sleepover and tell UFO stories. Some of it's true, some of it, all of it, they experience something. They're not lying, okay? But how much of this today, compared to the 60s and 70s, it's just entertainment? I don't know how many of these people I believe.
I think it's a totally different world. I think they're talking about it totally differently than they did back then. I think if you look at the 60s and 70s, even the UFO reports, they were more factual than today.
There seemed to be more evidence. It went from being
you don't have nothing now.
It went from a craft to being spiritual, altered state. It's totally different, unless, like you said, it's a different creature. Or has it always been the same creature wearing different clothes?
Yeah.
You know? I don't know, but I do know one thing, that in my opinion, because of the last year, you know, I put this hat out that, if you could see it, make ufology great again, like Trump. make ufology. I should, you know what?
Why don't you sell some at the conference?
That's exactly right.
Why don't you? I'll buy one.
I'm going to do that.
I'll get one too.
We're making those and we're bringing them to the...
I love that.
We're going to attend the symposium. I bought my ticket. And
that'll really make a few people mad.
I'm going to make that. Make ufology great again. You gave me a great idea.
That's a great idea.
I think that this field has slipped from being scientific and factual to being storytelling and ancient alien TV shows. That's a shame.
One of the problems is that we're dealing with a problem that people are trying to use the scientific method to solve,
and it
doesn't fit.
I agree.
You can't use the scientific method to solve this problem. It doesn't fit. You don't have a dependent, independent variable. You can't control the circumstances. You can't use the scientific method to figure this stuff out. What it gets down to is the preponderance of evidence.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
And most of it though is third hand or eyewitness with no physical evidence.
And
And
a
that's a
lot of
problem.
it's paranormal.
We have some physical evidence,
Yeah.
but not a lot.
Not a lot.
And once again, it gets down to the question, what do you consider proof?
So when you say paranormal to a bunch of people in MUFON, they look at you like you're
Yeah.
crazy, and you're you know, they don't want to talk to you.
And you know why that is? Because like me, they didn't read the other stuff.
Yeah.
I read UFOs. I immediately got into a TV show, UFOs of our Earth, and I said, oh, this is real. And I read the UFO stuff, who said it was real. And then I read the religious perspective. Then I read the demonic perspective, the exorcist perspective. And I said, wait a minute,
It
you
could
know?
all be true.
It could all be parts
Yeah,
of it,
yeah.
like you say, you know?
Yep.
But if you get a chance, I wrote my last book, String Theory of the Unexplained. It will be on Kindle in the next month or so. I'm not printing it because 4 of my 5 books are over 400 pages. And I sell them for a $2 profit, and I'm not going to be bothered.
So you're not gonna have a paperback.
No, there's not going to be a paperback. It'll be just on Kindle. So that's the book. It sums up 22 years of research into this field and what I believe. And that's it for me. Fred, this is our last episode.
This is your last book?
Yeah, I'm not, yeah.
Until
I
the
said
next
that,
one? Until the next one?
well, I said
Next
that,
last.
Yeah.
I said that in I think it was 2015 with the case for UFOs. And then I had all these paranormal experiences come to light, and I wrote 2 more.
You
But
know
I'm done now.
You'll
You
be
know what,
a-
Fred?
Yeah.
There's another one.
Yeah.
There's another
He'll be abducted, and we'll be right back there with the cameras talking again.
No,
You know.
the next book is going to be my political career.
Oh,
As
boy.
don't.
I am Trump to the 10th. I'm going to alienate all liberals.
Better let some of that hot water cool off.
That's it. Yeah. So that's our show. 76 episodes.
Pleasure,
I
John.
want to thank you. You are our
Congratulations,
first
John.
guest
And
and
the
our
last.
last guest.
Oh,
And I think these shows were great.
they were.
A
They were
lot
good.
of fun. A lot
That's
of
it.
fun.
Thank you.